Hello and welcome to this video. So imagine that you are in an engagement and you conduct some OSINT on the company in order to find some leads. And you come across a LinkedIn for one of the company workers and you decide to dig in further on him and see that his email is visible and leaked. So you decide to go ahead and start, trying to phish him. If you want to take a look in the lab, they give you this screenshot to give you some context as to how we got this user. And from there, we find this email. And so this is going to be a great lab to learn from. We're going to be looking at how to set up Evilginx, how to set up a publicly facing server in order to host Evilginx, and how to kind of grab an on-prem credential, an on-prem hash, an NTLM to crack it in order to get onto their cloud infrastructure. And after that, we're going to be trying to bypass MFA. So I'm going to be looking at a few techniques doing that. And then we're going to attack a container app as well as a Cosmos database. So let's get into that, just going through the diagram that I made here as always. So we have this email, and now we go ahead and set up the server. So I'm going to walk you through my setup, although you can set up your infrastructure however way you want. In fact, there are actually courses on how to do this professionally that I haven't gotten around to. However, let's take a look firstly at the firewall rules of your publicly facing server of your choice. Mine here is AWS. And I'm going to show you the firewall rules that you can go ahead and replicate. So a little bit of zoom in action over here. I hope that's visible. So as you can see, you can really just take a screenshot and add these firewall rules to your own EC2 instance. But let me go ahead and explain them to you. HTTP and HTTPS for, when you're using stagers and if you're hosting a C2 and things like that, which we do in these labs. SMB is what's going to be important. This SMB 445 and these two over here, 137 to 138 and 139. 22 in order to connect to the EC2 and 8888 just for some private, server hosting and kind of transferring payloads manually and things like that. And then we're going to be setting up our domain. So you need to have a domain for this. There are options to have a free one, but I'm going to show you mine right here using Squarespace. Firstly, I'm just going to grab the IP so that I can use it in my domain configurations. Oh, there's no way I didn't turn it on. It's initializing? Okay. We are running. So I'm going to grab the IP. Actually, I'm going to grab the public DNS in order to configure my DNS. And I'll show you why right here. So we're going to grab this. And if you're using Squarespace, you can follow along. But basically, the phishing server that we're going to host requires these subdomains. This is just, how it works and how it takes the user and sends them to these different subdomains in order for them to log in and things like that. And so firstly, we're going to use this, we're going to change this phishing subdomain. And by the way, all of these are C names in contrast to the lab guide if you're following the lab guide. This is just because that's how it works on Squarespace, so it may differ for you. But, there's always some time to experiment and see what's working on your stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and change these to the correct DNS name. and www phishing. And yeah, I'm not going to change that. By the way, if you are wondering why it's a subdomain of www, that's because www is my website. You can go see my services. All right, so now let's go ahead and access the EC2 so we can start getting set up. All right, now that we're here, go back to our diagrams. And let's actually go to our commands. So I have my commands here for Evilginx. And so when running it, I want to specify the dash P flag in order to specify where the fishlets are. And the fishlet that you're going to want to use is called 0365 fishlet. And so I'm just going to copy and paste this. We're going to start Evilginx. And now that we have that, I'm going to specify the IP of the EC2 that we're going to use in order to host the Evilginx. So going back to my EC2. Okay, set that. And then we set the phishing domain. And now we can use the fishlet in order to create a lure, aka it's gonna, start processing and it's gonna make us a URL to send to our target. Make sure we get the right ID for the lure. No host name. All right, these bad boys over here. Okay. ID 6. Okay, so now we have the lure URL. So when the guy clicks this, he's going to get bamboozled and we get all his stuff. So let's go into our emails. Let's see if there's anything here. And here is the email that we're going to be sending. I sent it before this, doing the lab on my own. Let's go ahead and send this with the correct code for the lure URL. And if you want some context, we just got to make this real. You know what I mean? So if you're going to be practicing how to fish, might as well get a little bit into it. And what I did here was I just tried to make it urgent. And I tried to include important names like Mr. Tanaka, the CFO, and put a little C symbol thing for what the companies do. And we got to put the company name over here. Security team of Mega Big Tech. And let's go ahead and send this. So we got a hit over here. Oh, sorry, no, blacklisted IP. This is just a random. So here we are, we get a hit. And as you can see, the password is I need a holiday. So let's look deeper at this session that we caught. And we get the cookies that they used when when they signed in. And with that, we are able to grab the complete credentials of Adrian. And now that we have Adrian's credentials, let's go ahead and try to sign in. And so as you can see, we get blocked by a multi-factor authentication. And so in this scenario, the quickest and simplest way to just get past very common multi-factor authentication caps, conditional access control policies, is to try to spoof your user agent. And so let's go ahead and do that with the same command, except we're going to use the flag in order to do the device code login. And for our user agent, we're going to be using the standard PlayStation user agent. That is this. And as for this user agent switcher extension, you can find it simply by going to Google. User agent changer is what I looked up. And we go ahead and find any one of these that suit us. And most of them do the trick. And so after we apply this user agent of PlayStation, we can go ahead and enter the code. Signing in again with Adrian. Great. And now we are able to get in using the standard authentication method of AZ login. This is super useful because AZ has specific commands that allow us to access certain resources that we simply can't do with an API call. For example, as you'll see in this video, we need AZ login, we need the AZ library in order to connect into a container. However, before we move on, I just wanted to show you a few other methods of getting around this multi-factor authentication. Now, when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we really need to take a look at what kind of access we have and whether or not we're able to see the multi-factor authentication rules themselves before we start experimenting and throwing kind of different attacks. And this allows us to really learn what works in different scenarios so that when we don't have that access to see those rules, then we can kind of imagine and make a blueprint in our minds as to what may work and what may not. So with that being said, I'm going to show you a tool that shows you the caps. Ahead and so using some previously attained access, I'm going to show you a tool called Road Recon. And I'm going to show you the rules on this guy, the rules on, what's his name? Adrian, that was preventing us from logging in. And so if you're following along, you can use pretty much almost any credential in order to make this happen. And what Road Recon just did is it just dumped all the conditional access policies for us in this page, HTML, for us to look at. And so let's go ahead and search for Adrian and take a look at what's happening. So I'm going to explain how MFA policies work here, conditional access policies, so that you can use that in order to bypass MFA for any of these labs in the future. Firstly, MFA only occurs when included as per these inclusion lines. So MFA only applies to when it is included Adrian Taylor. It applies to all applications. It applies to when the user is trying to log in through iOS, Windows Phone, Mac OS, and Linux. It doesn't apply when you're on Android. So as you can see, in order to bypass this, one very quick way is to make your user agent that you're on Android. However, because PlayStation isn't in this list of included, then PlayStation also worked. All right. And so before we move on, we are going to do one more thing, which is manipulate some tokens. And how we're going to do that is we're going to use a tool called Find Me Access. And Find Me Access can be found on GitHub. Just search this string right here, Find Me Access GitHub, and you'll get to it. And so if we run Find Me Access with the token command, we're going to try to dump Adrian's access token and refresh token. So let's see if we can do that. Damn, so MFA blocked us. And this is probably because, as you saw, the caps assume that the user is trying to access through Android because that's what their worker is accessing through. And so if we're not specifying that we're on Android or any user agent that is, not blocked, then we won't be able to get his tokens. Find Me Access makes it really convenient as to how to go about this. Firstly, we can go ahead and completely scan for all user agents that are valid and that bypass the MFA. And so we use this command specifying the user, their creds, and the API endpoint that we're trying to get a token from. So here we're trying to get a management token. And then this critical flag --UA_all in order for it to check all of the user agents that work. All right, so we got the results to this text file. And so taking a look at it, we get a giant list of all user agents that are permissible in order for you to bypass MFA. And it's just a lovely site. But moving forward, we're going to go ahead and use one of these. in order to do what we couldn't do before, which was get the refresh token and the access token for management. However, let's go ahead and get all tokens that are possible to be retrieved through this other find me access token, find me access command. And so this get all with the refresh token is going to retrieve all the tokens utilizing the refresh token that we just got. And so I know that we already got access and we bypassed MFA, but I just wanted to make sure that you know this procedure for the situations where you are trying to do things like custom tooling for different situational scenarios that you need tokens for. You need to do native API calls in different situations. And if you're on a red team, then most likely you're going to require, specifically created scripts and tools that are noiseless or reduce the noise whilst you're trying to enumerate. And that's why tokens are critical for these situations. And I'm going to show you how to go ahead and use one of these tokens. So let's go ahead and scroll to the management token that we get. Actually, let's go ahead and use the graph token real quick. And this is a perfect time to demonstrate the quickest way to enumerate graph, which is through this tool called Graph Running. Now, this is not a website. This is actually a file on our computer, and it comes when you get Graph Runner. And so you can find Graph Runner on GitHub, and once you clone it and everything, you will get this HTML page. And with this HTML page, you can go ahead and paste the graph access token here, parse token, and we get access to graph. Now, the most convenience about this is that you just click a bunch of buttons to get what you want. So immediately we get all the users, we get the groups, we get the emails, etc. And it's very simple and convenient. Especially if you're doing these labs, I highly suggest that you go ahead and delve into all this stuff. However, we're going to go back to the management API using the initial access that we got and move forward here with the lab. Or actually, I'm going to show you how to connect with the management token first, just in case you are not familiar with that. So let's go ahead and grab the management access token. Go back to our Windows PowerShell. Set the token as a variable. And if you noticed, I do switch between my Windows host and my Kali. And this is because I found that it's very unreliable to use PowerShell for these labs on Kali Linux. Now, I'm not sure why, but probably because the lack of integration and how Windows is much more integrated with PowerShell. And maybe that's why the connection or the code or whatever works better. But once you set this variable, we're going to go ahead and try to connect using the variable that has the access token. So I set it right here. And what we're going to do is we're connecting through connect-az account using the access token that we set with the account ID of the user. Am I tripping? And with the username's email and the tenant ID. Now, if you're unsure of how we got the tenant ID in this case, we can simply go ahead on Google, get tenant ID of Azure domain. And we can go to this site over here. What is my tenant ID? And we can put the domain. And this is also a great way to very quickly check if your target is using Azure. You put the domain in here and you'll get the tenant ID, which we'll use frequently. So as you can see, there is a subscription name and we are good to go. So one other way to access something is through the portal. And I want to kind of touch on that because the portal is such a great asset when you're trying to get through with multi-factor authentication. And it's so convenient for you, especially if you're still unfamiliar with every single command. I mean, I know pen testers that are in the Microsoft Azure Hacking Bootcamp, and they've been pen testing Azure like for a while. And they just quite frequently, they're like, wow, I never knew about this command or that command, or I didn't even know that this service had a command for like this and so on. And so if you're using the portal, you can skip all that and just click around to see what you want to get. And so let's go ahead and do that. If we go to a random service like Sentinel, using the access that we have of Adrian and the user agent being assigned, which for us right now is PlayStation 5, we'll be able to get into the portal and bypass MFA in order to do so. And so once we're here, we can go back to the home in order to see all the resources. However, this is unreliable. And what we need to do is press not this, but we need to press and see for all of the resources. Not recent, but where is it? All resources here. And so this will ensure that it's showing us every single resource. This kind of messed me up on a CTF because I was thinking that all the resources are over here, but in fact, you need to press all resources over here. And so we see that we have this resource, Project Oakley, and it's a container app. So let's go ahead and enter it. Forget about this request error stuff. It's happening because of the MFA problem that we have. And I think there's like this thing where the access token isn't set because you're trying to bypass MFA. But either way, things still work pretty much. And we just go ahead and get what we need. Which in this case, let me see what it was. I need to hopefully, right. We find a secret. It's base 64. And so you can go ahead and enumerate everything, and you should, especially in services that you haven't attacked a lot in the past. But I'm going to go ahead and show you what we do find eventually, and it's a secret called account key. And so we just grab that and we paste it over here. As you can see, I did. And so now that we did that, let's go back to the CLI and continue through the initial way that we got access. So once we're on the CLI, first things first, let's see what we can access. And as you already know, we know that there is a resource that is a container app called Project Oakley. And with those, with container apps, what I said before, which was that AZ commands have special functions that they can do. And what I meant by that is that with this AZ command, we are able to connect and enter the container app. And that's something that we are unable to do with something like the get AZ library or native API calls. And so I did skip on enumerating container apps. However, if you want all the commands of enumerating container apps as well as all other services, just message me or comment and I'll go ahead and send you my list of commands for that. But in terms of this lab, the critical path simply involves us getting that base 64 and then connecting to the container app with this command. And so now that we're here, we can just simply check it out. And, where are we? And as you can see, this is a container. And so as with any instance or what do you call it? Sort of machine or container or VM or web server, on Azure, we can get, if it has a management identity, we can get an access token and then impersonate this container and see what access it has and start to move laterally. So in order to do that, just like any cloud service provider, we can curl the endpoint. We can curl this endpoint in order to get the access token. And now a few things here. Firstly, this command that I used can be used universally across all the different things that I mentioned, a VM, a web server, etc. You can use this command because on Azure, they always use this variable name, identity header, and they always use the same variables in order to make this procedure happen. And to confirm, we can go ahead and look at the environment variables, and we can see over here that the identity header involves this ID for the container app, and the identity endpoint is going to involve the URL for which the identity management is taking place and from which you can get a token. Now in this, the lab instructor or the bootcamp instructor did say that the port is randomized. However, you can probably brute force that. In terms of the identity ID, you can get that through other means and other access. And thus, if you're looking into how you could access this through a publicly facing endpoint of the container or anything like that, that's just to give you an idea of how you might be able to do that. And so let's go ahead and grab this access token. And we can make a new PowerShell. Just because if you don't make a new PowerShell, you're going to have to clear a bunch of stuff and delete a bunch of stuff. So it's much more convenient just to restart the PowerShell altogether. So let's go ahead and set this service principal token, access token. And with that, we're going to need to authenticate to this using this command here, and I'll explain it to you. And so just like before, we're going to use the connect-az library with the access token and the tenant ID, which we already know, and then the account ID, which I showed you in the environment variables. All right, and now just like before, the first thing we should do is check what resources we have access to. And as you can see, there is a database. Here we see a database accounts resource type, and it's called Project Oakley, and then this number. And in the tags, it's actually revealed what's going on with this database. It is a Cosmos database. And the format is as a table. And so we can use this command to get more information out of it. From the information that we gathered from it here, from the general command, we know that it's a Cosmos database. So we're going to use the get-az Cosmos database table command. And just like all of resources, we're going to specify the resource group and the resource, which is this project Oakley. Okay, and as you can see, we got the table called monitored IPs. Now, although we can't get the internal content of monitored underscore IPs, we can't get the internal content of this table. What we can do, because we have the secret that allows us to access this Cosmos database through the endpoint online for Cosmos databases, we can actually go ahead and use that secret that we got earlier, this base 64, in order to get access online. So going here, I'm going to copy our thing, and it's called a connection string. And if we use the connection string authentication method for this to connect, you just paste it in here and connect. And so I tried to connect with just the secret, but the format of a connection string only involves a secret. However, it involves something else. And so how it works is there is this. We have account key equals, and that's where we place the secret. And then we have the table endpoint variable, which the value of that is going to be the URL of the database, and then 443. And so I made that here using that format, and we go ahead and paste it. And as you can see, we connected, and from here, you can enumerate the table entities and get the flag. So I hope you enjoyed that lab guide and just a little bit about multi-factor authentication and Evilginx and all that. And if you enjoyed that, please leave a like and subscribe and comment what you would like to see about any cloud penetration testing techniques and methods. And thank you very much, and see you later.